Hey, in this problem, we're asked to debug the program that has scope violations, and we're going to add comments that label the variable declarations as class method or block scope. So here in the main method, we've got a new object being instantiated called F1. It's going to call the fraction constructor that has no arguments. So we come down here to our class fraction, and we've got instance variables, private int numerator, and that has class scope, and private int denominator, that instance variable also has class scope. So those instance variables, when a new object is instantiated, those numerator and denominator instance variables in our constructor are going to be assigned the value d as the default value, and inside of that constructor we have an int d equals 1 that has local scope, and it's only relevant to this constructor. So this variable d has no meaning outside of these brackets in the fraction constructor. But they don't cause any errors. So currently our object f1 has a numerator equal to 1 and a denominator equal to 1. Okay, then back to our main method in the tester class. We're going to instantiate another fraction object called f2, but this constructor is going to receive two parameters, two integers. So we come down here to the constructor for two arguments, and those values are going to be 1 and 2 when they're passed by parameter. Okay, this constructor's purpose is to set the instance variables to the initial parameters, and it looks like that's happening. So our numerator instance variable is going to be 1, and the denominator is going to be 2. And these parameters that are arguments rather that are in the constructor header, these have local scope to this constructor only. Okay, the instance variables, they were declared earlier at the beginning of the fraction class, and they have class scope. Okay, so no errors there. And we're going to look back up at our main method, and next we've got system out print line f1. That's going to call the toString method, and we'll look down in our fraction class, and here's our toString method. So it's a public method. It's going to return a string, and the precondition tells us that if the denominator is 1, then just return the value of the numerator. When we look at the if statement condition, denominator equals d, d only had local scope to the constructor with no parameters. So the computer doesn't have any value for d here. But because we're just testing to see if it's a 1, I can just change that d to a 1. Now it says that if the denominator is 1, we just return the numerator. Instead, what's happening as an effect on this condition is they're assigning a new numerator the value of 1, and that variable would have local scope, but we really don't need that variable because it says if the denominator is 1, just return the numerator. So instead of that statement, we can eliminate that, and we're going to return the numerator instance variable. Now the method, the toString method returns a string, and numerator is an int. So we're going to have to use string.valueOf on that numerator so that it returns a string. Another way to do that would be to do the empty set. So you could instead do return and then empty quotation marks plus numerator, and that concatenation would convert the numerator to a string as well. So either of those would be fine. Okay, and then if the denominator is not equal to 1, it looks like we're going to return just the numerator because we got rid of that new numerator expression, or variable rather, and concatenate that with the division symbol and the denominator. So it's going to return the numerator over denominator as a string, and that looks fine to me. So we'll go back up here to our main method and system out print line. Now we have in our toString method that numerator concatenated with the denominator, which is what we want to output. We don't want to do this integer division. That would return 0 because it would truncate. So instead of dividing two integers, we're just going to call the toString method on F2 since we have a condition that addresses when your denominator is not equal to 1. Okay, so let's see. I think we've got them all. We'll go ahead and hit save and run and then see what happens. There we go. So we've got our output to match what we wanted to.